Okay, in simple cooperation, capitalism has begun to transform the labour process, but still the physical work that the capital worker does is not changed from what it might have been in before capitalist production. And the first change which capital makes in production, which changes the individual activity, is what Marx calls manufacture. The term's a bit confusing because by manufacture he doesn't mean what we mean by manufacturing today. He simply means production by hand labour, but on the basis of a developed division of labour in the factory. So that you have, for example, and this is an example that Marx takes, workers making watches. But instead of the watchmaker being an individual craft worker who makes the entire watch in her or his workshop, instead even of lots of such watch workers being brought together in a single factory, in a single workshop, the job of making the watch is divided up among specialities. There's a famous example of this sort of thing in Adam Smith about pin making, where one worker now straightens the bit of metal, one puts the point on, one puts the head on, and so on. Marx describes this in a lot more detail with watches, where there are people who spend their whole lives just making the hands for the watch. They don't do any of the production. They just make the hands, or they just make some other part of the watch. So this tends to increase productivity because obviously each worker becomes particularly skilled in their particular trade, and in that sense it gives the capitalists greater potential for profit. However, from the capitalist point of view, there are severe obstacles built into this form of production which tend to lead to it being superseded. The primary one is that the worker who makes the hands for the watch, they know a lot more about that than the manager, the capitalist. They are likely to be resistant to discipline. Also, they're not easily replaced. If the capitalist comes along and says, make these watch hands a lot quicker, they will just say, look, this is what it takes to produce good watch hands. I'm going to produce good watch hands. Leave it at that. And the capitalist can't just go outside the workshop and get somebody in off the streets to make the watch hands, because it's a specialist trade. The person who's doing it has been doing it for decades. She or he knows how to do it extremely well. So it's a form of production which is resistant to capitalist control. And that's why it tends to be superseded. It doesn't mean that it's a good form of production from the point of view of the working class, because it leads to workers, you acquire a special skill making watch hands. You have there's a very narrow range of operations you perform, and for a lot of these specialist jobs that produces physical impairments. The narrow range of your movements, and also it's not very life enhancing, just doing watch hands all the time. It acts against a general education of the working class. And so Marx argues that developed capitalist industry tends to move beyond both simple cooperation and this simple division of labour. And those forms still exist. They're constantly reproduced within capitalist production, but developed capitalist production tends to take a different form, which we will discuss now.